Good afternoon, everybody. What a joy to be here. And welcome to the television studio here at the University of Bradford for this afternoon's UNIfy webinar. We're here today to talk about the important issue of the menopause, which until recently has not been openly discussed. The event today will enable us to increase our understanding of what the menopause is, including the perimenopause and postmenopause, and how these impact on women, their families, work colleagues, and communities. The menopause, as a lived experience for women, will affect more than half the population at some point in their lives. It is important that we listen to and act on these lived experiences. We know that although we have come a long way in respect of gender equality, for example, the gender pay gap is decreasing. There are more women in higher paid occupations, and gender inequality in political representation is decreasing. Girls are even outperforming boys at school, and women are more likely to enroll in higher education than men. However, there are still formidable obstacles that still remain for women. Enabling our colleagues to understand what the menopause means for women in the workplace is one of these obstacles. In May 2023, the University of Bradford registered our commitment to become a menopause-friendly workplace. Focusing on menopause is part of our wider ambition to develop a women's health strategy, which will consider women's journey throughout their career with us and the impact of our environment on their ability to thrive and have the career they aspire to. We want everyone to understand menopause, to be provided with the appropriate support, and to be able to talk openly without embarrassment by removing the stigma and normalizing the conversation. Events like the one today are all part of how we are doing this. We have already learned so much about the impact menopause can have on women in the workplace. For example, 8 out of 10 menopausal women are in work. Fastest growing workforce demographic. 3 in 4 experience symptoms. 1 in 4 severe symptoms. 14% have gone part-time. 8% have not applied for promotion. 1 in 4 consider leaving work, and according to the recent research, 1 in 10 have shared story on someone who nearly left work if it wasn't for their manager. We certainly didn't want this to be the case at the university, so we decided that if we are to be successful in our aspiration to harness and leverage the collective strength and talent across our diverse community, we need to make it easy for everyone to come to work, including those who are experiencing menopausal symptoms, whatever stage they are at. We also know that an inclusive workplace and colleague well-being are at the heart of menopause in the workplace support. And in turn, this can bring a host of other benefits, including improved equity, diversity, and inclusion. So today we are joined by a panel of experts who are going to share their expertise and experience with us to help us understand why it is so important that every organization takes menopause in the workplace seriously. So my name is Uda Achibong, Professor of Diversity and Pro-Vice Chancellor for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at the university. I've got 4 fantastic colleagues who will be joining me. I'll just give you their names, and then later on I'll call them individually to tell you more about them. So Sally is a training director at Handpicked Menopause in the workplace and the Menopause Friendly Accreditation. Sally, please tell us a bit more about yourself and your work.
Thank you very much, Edie, and thank you very much for having us here today. Really delighted to be part of this event. So I'm the Training Director at Menopause Friendly and Menopause in the Workplace, and we've been working with organisations over around 8 years now, really helping organisations both in the UK and globally to look at how they can become that menopause-friendly organisation. So thinking about the policies and practices they have in place, the training, education and support, but really what you were saying around that lived experience, understanding what that lived experience is and how we can really help and support people to change that lived experience so that it's really positive. And I think today's event is great because we can look at the role that we can all play in doing that.
Thank you very much, Sally. Also joining us live via Skype this afternoon is Raj Baines, Head of Content, Huddersfield Town Football Club. Good afternoon, Raj. Thank you for joining us. Please tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us. Sorry I'm not in person and I'm over the internet. We've got a few things going on at the club that I couldn't get across for. But yeah, as you say, I'm head of content at Huddersfield Town. Effectively, I work in the communications department here. I look after all the inbound and outbound communications. That ranges from website, social media, everything in the press. All of the media contacts that we do all come through myself. I also sit on our EBI group, a working group that works internally. I have a look at all the things internally and externally at the football club that we could either do better, have existing projects on. That includes Menopause. We were the first football club, we think, in the world, but at least in the UK, to become a menopause-friendly employer, which is a huge honour. But we do work across all different subsets of minority and background work, and we want that to be an end goal under the umbrella of Terriers Together, as we call it, to make sure that the football club is as open and inclusive to absolutely everybody as possible.
Thank you so much, Raj, for that. In the studio, we are also joined by Melissa Sukia. Melissa is a pharmacist from Leeds who has launched the online pharmacy Vive to support women with menopause symptoms. Melissa, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. My name's Melissa. I am a pharmacist. I've been in the pharmacy world from the age of about 15. I wanted something that was designed for women that was more affordable and more accessible. I found that a lot of women could not access doctor's appointments, GP appointments, and the private world was getting a lot more expensive for women. As pharmacists, we're experts in medicines. There's so many different HRT options out there for women, and a lot of women didn't know how to use the HRT they were given. And also there's a lot of women that can't use HRT as well. So I'm a British Menopause Society trained expert, and also I'm a prescriber as well. So we wanted something that could join both pharmacy and consultants as well, so that we can give access to women for as many menopause specialists as possible. We also do a lot of work with employees as well, so that we can give that expert help to employees in the workplace too.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and welcome. And finally, we're joined by Jill Barlow. Jill is Head of Student Wellbeing here at the University of Bradford. Jill, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, so yes, I'm Jill Barlow. I'm the Head of Student Wellbeing here at the university, and my background's in psychotherapy, mental health, but I'm here to bring share a little bit of my own personal experience as a menopausal woman in the workplace. Yeah, I think there are sort of, is it 48 or 49 symptoms of the menopause, and I could probably tick about 44 of those boxes. But definitely the standout symptom for me was quite severe joint pain, which took me completely by surprise, because I've never ever had a hot flush, and so I didn't fit that kind of stereotypical, oh, this is what women experience when they go through menopause. So yeah, it sort of started in my lower back and then went into my knees and my elbows and shoulders and ankles and wrists. So it was very quite scary and quite confusing for me, but also for the doctors who wanted to test me for rheumatoid arthritis and polymyalgia, fibromyalgia. And actually it took quite a bit of pushing and my own digging and research to to start to put hormones and hormone imbalance on the table and start to really ask for what I needed, and that took quite a bit of time. And I think it's great that we're having these kinds of conversations, because, you know, we don't need to be suffering like that, actually. And not just us as women, but also, you know, the more informed we are, our partners are, our children are, our managers are, you know, everybody wins if there's more information available for women to be able to make choices and to be supported in that, in making those choices, especially and including in the workplace.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all panel members. Gosh, what an exciting opportunity to share this, because there's so much that we're going to try and get out of you for this conversation. So we know there will be many people that have joined us on Teams that will put questions to us, but we do have some questions that we've gathered beforehand. And if I can just ask, starting with Sally and Melissa, get ready because you'll join this one too. What is your understanding of menopause? What is it? So think about a lay person walking up to you and just saying, what is it? I hear this term all the time. What is it? So I'll ask Melissa then. Melissa.
So this is a question we get asked quite a lot, because you hear terms like perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, and they're all kind of huddled together. And I think a lot of what Jill said when you're talking about the symptoms, and it's being aware of what symptoms are coming throughout all stages. So menopause is just one day in your life when you've stopped your periods for 12 months. However, we have the symptoms that are, there's probably, like Jill said, about 48 symptoms minimum that can start from your early to mid 30s, that can be perimenopause, that can last all the way through that as you go from perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause. So the piece that we're doing is making women aware, women, men, friends, colleagues, everybody really, aware about the symptoms that you can get as you go through perimenopause, menopause and postmenopause. And this is when your estrogen levels decline. This is when your symptoms start to materialise, and this is when you start to get lack of anxiety, can materialise, low moods, vaginal dryness, low libido, brain fog, hot sweats, and they're the most common ones that we see quite a lot of. So being aware of what the symptoms are as you go through perimenopause and menopause. Sometimes the periods can be apparent, sometimes they're not apparent, and so it's different for everybody. It's not a one size fits all. It's just making everybody aware of what can happen as you go through this phase.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Before you go, can I just ask you about some of the misconceptions that exist about and myths about menopause?
Yeah. So there's so many. The one that we see a lot is a lot of the women that come to us are when they've been to see the GP, and the GP says, you're not the right age yet, you're not 45, you've not stopped your periods, so let's start you on some antidepressants first. So we get a lot of people that have come to us because they're not the right age or they're not the right category. They've had a blood test. A lot of women think that you need a blood test to diagnose the menopause, but that's definitely not the case. A blood test does not diagnose whether you're suitable for treatment or not. A lot of women think that it's based on your periods. That can be an indicator of where you are, but it's not. Basically, it's more about the consultation process, and that's where we spend a lot of time in our consultation, understanding what your past medical history is, what your symptoms are, what your signs are, what other lifestyle factors are, because that's really, really important as well. Your diet, your nutrition, your exercise, and we need to package everything else up together. What's going on at work, what's going on at home. So menopause isn't just a tick box exercise where you can just say, yes, you tick these exercise box, and yes, you are in the menopause or not, and yes, you can have one HRT, and then that's you done for life. And then that's the other thing with HRT or any kind of treatment for the menopause, you can't be on it for life on one thing. You need to have regular reviews. So again, a lot of the women that we see have been put on one treatment and then they're not seen again for another few years, whereas they need regular reviews with the GP.
Thank you so much. I have certainly learned a lot from that, and because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, I'll return to you because there's something called black menopause, and I've heard a lot about it, and there are issues, so I'll pick that up later. If I can just turn to Sally and Jill, you come in here. Get ready, Raj, it will be your turn soon, because we're now turning to the impact of menopause on women in the workplace. Just tell us something, Sally.
Yeah, well, I think the statistics you shared at the beginning, I think sometimes are quite shocking for people as to the impact of how many women consider leaving work or do actually leave work because of their symptoms. And when you think and actually understand some of the data around why, a lot of the time it's where people don't understand, as Melissa was saying, they don't understand what's going on, and as Jill shared as well, because don't have that education or understanding, it can be hard to identify that menopause is what's causing challenges for somebody. But one of the key drivers is where people don't feel comfortable talking about it at work, so they don't feel comfortable talking to their manager. So I'm sure we'll hear from Raj. It's very much the creating that culture where it feels okay to talk about this as a subject, removing those worries and fears about how someone's going to be viewed. One of the exercises we do, and this is again one of the myths around menopause, is what do you associate with menopause? And it's things like hot, tired, angry and old. And if that's our perception, it's hard for someone to put their hand up at work and say, that's me. So we've got an opportunity to really change that in the way we talk about it. So I'd say that's the big thing. Changing that narrative can really make a big difference to how confident people feel talking about it at work.
Thank you, Sally. Jill, you talked about your lived experience. So I'm just going to ask you, give me an example of how you started a conversation with a colleague about that impact, the impact of menopause in the workplace.
Well, I mean, when I first started experiencing, especially the joint symptoms, I couldn't walk upstairs without bursting into tears. So I was off. I had to take time off, and at the time I had a really helpful manager who. She didn't know much more than I did, actually, but she listened and gave me some space to just talk about what I might need and how work could be supportive. I know we have an employee assistance programme, for example, at Bradford that she said, do you need to be speaking to I mean, I'm a psychotherapist, I know that when I need to speak to somebody. So we were having those kinds of conversations. But I think, what can often happen is that, these symptoms are coming up at a time in our lives when, we're looking after possibly adolescent children who might be going through their own hormonal transition, or adult children who are leaving home, and we might have caring responsibilities. We might already be in quite responsible positions at work. So it's quite hard to separate and name exactly what's happening, because it all could easily fall under this umbrella of stress, or I'm just tired, or I've got a lot on my plate. So I think in the workplace there is pressure, isn't there, and a will to want to do well and to perform, and that mixed in with this kind of time of life where we're incredibly busy, or can be incredibly busy, it can be quite hard to know where to start actually with those conversations without feeling a bit overwhelmed by it all.
Thank you very much, Jill. Raj, your turn now. Can you hear me, Raj? Yeah. Yes, okay. Congratulations that your football club has got this beautiful accolade. Let's see how it works in practice. So can you just
Thank you very
give
much.
us...
It's been a while since somebody said congratulations to us as a football club, but it's nice to hear that.
Yeah, so if I may just turn to you and just talk us through the strategies or activities that you have in place to encourage that open communication in the workplace as a menopause-friendly organisation.
Yeah, so this is a piece of work that started over a year ago. We started with a compulsory training for everybody. So we had a number of web courses that as a club, everybody across the business in different areas partook in. And it went through a lot of the things that have already been discussed today, the symptoms, the experience that different women have at different ages, different stages of menopause, and what they are, those can be identified as. But it went a step further to say, as employees and as colleagues, and also family members and other things, because this isn't just a workplace matter, how you can be supportive, how you can be understanding, whether that's in a direct role or an indirect role, how you can just have a bit more awareness about yourself. And that is true of everything we try to do in EDI at the football club. We try to have an open and honest dialogue across many different causes. Menopause is just one of them. A recent piece of work we've just started to undertake in a similar areas around menstruation as well. The demographic of people who work here, a high proportion of them are female, at all levels, in all different areas of the football clubs, be that sporting and non-sporting as well. So it's important that given we have such a diverse and mixed staff base in terms of gender, that those conversations are open, they're honest, and we've experienced a real difference since that work has been undertaken. There's women of a certain age are more than happy to admit when they're feeling hot or talk about it a little bit more. There's males who work around them all the time who don't have a discomfort around having that conversation as much, and are able to take those feedbacks and those issues on board a little bit more and be more understanding. There's also a little bit more lightheartedness around it as well. Obviously, sometimes there's pain associated, there are complications associated, but sometimes it might just be a feeling at the time. But being able to sympathise and sort of humanise what is going on in something that won't affect us as males at all is really helpful, and I think has positively impacted the atmosphere at the workplace for our female colleagues, and positively impacted the outlook and behaviour of male colleagues too, who would have previously gone about their working life and life in general unaware, because it is not something that would have crossed our mind too heavily previously.
Thank you so much, Raj. I think you've really beginning to delve into an area that I want to explore. In my work around EDI, I think there are times that we tend to want to fix and just put the factors on the individuals. And the difficulty we have with that deficit approach is we don't succeed. If I can just turn to you, starting with Sally, and then I'll come to Melissa. What structural things do we have to put in the workplace so that the woman, menopausal woman, can just feel part of, they can bring their whole self to the organisation?
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point. It's about that balance of the kind of formal things. So having policies and practices in place is really useful, because whether it's a policy or a guidance, it gives that overriding, how does your organisation support this? It helps somebody going through this to understand what support they can expect, but also helps educate managers on what's expected of them and how they can normalise that conversation, have that supportive conversation. But I think one of the big things organisations can do is really listen to their people, because understanding what that lived experience is like, and we've got lots of examples where being able to access toilet facilities easily is really important. And in one organisation, it was a 20-minute route through security in a nuclear energy company to be able to get to access the toilet. And that's a real barrier that was in place. So listening and understanding and giving people a safe space to be able to share their experiences, I think is probably one of the key things for that cultural shift. And again, that's what we've seen Huddersfield Town have done really well, to really give people that opportunity to share those experiences and understand how it feels to experience menopause in their workplace.
Thank you very much. Can I just come to you, Melissa? I think in terms of some of the medicalisation that comes with this, and I think we talked about myths and where people should run to when they need stuff, and sometimes we all get confused. Can you just talk about those specific things in terms of the structures, having the right approach to what medication or what medical support can be given to women?
And again, going back to some of what you said and some of what Sally said and Jill said as well, from an employer's perspective too, it's making sure that people know where to get information from and know what is menopause, what's not menopause. A lot of treatments can be over-the-counter treatments as well. if you know that some of the symptoms are bloatedness, migraines, vaginal dryness, some of these symptoms can be treated with over-the-counter remedies, but it's knowing that these symptoms are perimenopause or menopause in the first place. So again, it's a lot of education work to begin with and starting right from scratch. So a lot of employers need to start with the basics and making sure that their staff know that this is perimenopause and menopause first to begin with, because some people don't even know that. Having thrush regularly, having cystitis regularly, having burning when you go to the toilet, that is lack of estrogen, and they keep treating it all the time with the wrong remedies. So understanding what that is really, really important. So I think just having access on an online platform to where to get information from is really important, what to ask from at the pharmacy, how to speak to your doctor when you've got these symptoms is really important before you even go and get an appointment, so that you know that when you go to the doctor or to the pharmacy what your symptoms are, that these are what you're actually going for, because a lot of the patients that we see are often frustrated because they know what they've gone to get and then they come back because they didn't have the confidence to get what they wanted in the first place. So I think education about what's perimenopause, what's the symptoms, and how can I be treated with what I need is really, really important.
Thank you very much. Yes, that bit about empowering women to voice things that they need, understand your body and tell people about it and get the information. Jill, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was, as you were speaking then, I totally get all of that. I was thinking that, you know, we need to just keep hormones in mind, whatever age we are, actually, and have that as a kind of option or possibility for us to be thinking about what might be going on with our bodies. We don't talk about, especially sex hormones, that we don't talk about them. They're off the agenda. There's a cultural narrative around women's bodies, women's sexual health, women's hormonal health. There's not enough research. You know, there's not enough conversations. You know, I think just holding that in mind. I know with all the reading and listening to lots of podcasts and kind of informing myself through this transition, it's a bit like, oh gosh, you know, I feel that I probably managed women over the years who were going through this transition, and it didn't occur to me to have that hormonal conversation. Is this to do with your heart? It just didn't even come up. I'm pretty certain when I was going through perimenopause, you know, I was even talking to doctors. Well, even recently talking to doctors, the hormone question doesn't come up. Oh no, it's something to do with your joints. Or I know lots of women who've experienced quite severe mental health symptoms. It wasn't for myself particularly, but you know, that was then a conversation about antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, which, you know, the word hormones wasn't even coming into that conversation. And I think it is just about broadening our perspective, isn't it, and holding that in mind.
That's really exciting to hear, because sometimes when we're looking at menopause, we also need to look at intersections. So the term hormones for me will apply to different populations in our workplaces. Trans people who are going through hormonal treatments, and other people who through other reasons may be going through hormonal treatment. So that's a good call, Jill. Raj, can I just ask you a very specific question about how you've been can you hear me now? Okay, all right. So can you just talk through what support networks you have put in place? So talk through the establishing of those networks. If you think about the stigma around the topic, how did you get people to join those networks?
Yeah, so we've got a Women's Plus network at the football club, which is in part a supporter group, but also a safe space for women both who work internally and support us externally to come and meet around the team, who just want to have a shared experience of their femininity. You know, we do different talks, we put on different events. We've had them about menopause in the past, and that's there to give people a place where they feel there are like-minded people with similar lived-in experiences that they can learn and discuss and bounce off one another in a place that's mutually beneficial. That's reflected internally as well. We've got menopause policies and female health policies and what have you that extends beyond that, that gives the people confidence in just their own working life, that they'll be looked after as well. But there's as we did touch on previously, that the mentality shift is there, and the target is that those conversations don't just have to happen in safe spaces or spaces perceived to be as safe. You can speak to whoever your line manager is, your colleague is, regardless of who they are, their lived-in experience or gender. It's more about trying to create an environment where these conversations can be had regardless, but we recognise that that's not always the case. Confidence and comfort can't be forced on people, but being able to make groups and spaces where that can hopefully be more of the case is another goal of ours. We've got them with our LGBTQ plus group as well, Proud About Town, and several other supporter groups. It's just trying to give people as many different options to feel supported and do what's best for them as we possibly can.
Thank you, Raj. So we did ask our audience to send questions beforehand. What we want to do now is just turn and pick up those questions that we received. But in the meanwhile, if you can write in your questions, we'll pick that after. So one of the questions submitted by our participants is about HRT. So I'm coming to you straight there. There is HRT, other supplements and information on how the para and sympathetic nervous system affects the body during the change. I understand menopause itself lasts for about a year when your periods stop altogether. But what happens after? So this person is wanting you to tell us about post-menopause.
So again, we still have a lack of estrogen after menopause. So a lot of women can get symptoms that we've talked about after the menopause as well. Sometimes you have no symptoms before menopause and the symptoms can come in after the menopause. Our needs for estrogen are less as we go through post-menopause, but we can still get a number of the symptoms that we talked about. So this is why HRT still has a place for post-menopausal women. There are still a number of benefits for HRT. It's still first-line treatment to help prevent heart disease, help prevent osteoporosis, help prevent dementia. It's still first-line treatment for women that can have HRT. It still has a place, and our bodies still will benefit from using HRT if you can use it. But the needs, like we would tend to use lower doses post-menopause for estrogen and progesterone for post-menopausal women.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really helpful. We still need to get out there and get ourselves sorted post-menopausally. What about early menopause? Who's going to take that one? Okay. So, at 40, Sally.
Yeah, I can do. So in terms of early menopause, so the average age of menopause in the UK is generally between 45 and 55, and as Melissa explained, that's that one-day event. And obviously we have perimenopause before. But some people can go through what's called a premature menopause or premature ovarian insufficiency, so POI. And this is where somebody reaches menopause before the age of 40. And although it's relatively rare, it's probably more common than we think and has a really significant impact on things like challenges with fertility and people not expecting to go through that at that much earlier age and living for much longer length of their life with lower levels of the hormones that Melissa's been talking about. And that has potential impacts in terms of long-term health. So there's a lot of considerations. And the other time that people could go through an early menopause is following surgery. And I think it's a really important thing that we recognise menopause isn't always a natural process for everybody. Some people may have it following surgery, medical treatment. So we need to be mindful of the language we use and recognising the different experiences and journeys people can go on. So I think really from an early menopause point of view, not making assumptions around the age this turns up for people, because there could be people much younger than you expect going through this, and we need to make sure they feel part of this conversation and fully supported.
I mean, I picked something there about language, but there is a big thing about compassion.
Yeah.
You know, just bringing humanity into the workplace.
Absolutely.
Because it can be any time, rather than the assumption that somebody's of a particular age and therefore they're going through menopause. Thank you so much for that. So what would your advice be to a colleague who felt unable to speak to their manager about the impact of the menopause on her work? Jill, you want to take that one?
I would be advising that they speak to friends, colleagues, if they can't speak to the manager. Start to use the language, start to open those conversations about even just using the word menopause. I know that was certainly my experience. The more I sort of talked about it and dared speak it in my social circles, in my professional circles, the more of those conversations I had, and that then left me and the relief I can see on other women's faces when I have those conversations, and on male colleagues' faces when they could say, "Oh, this is my partner's experience, or this is my wife's experience, or this is my mum's experience." I think there's something empowering in that can then mean that, you know, we feel more confident and more able to have conversations with our managers about this subject. I think it's about building up confidence and informing ourselves and dropping the shame around it, you know, just letting that go, really empowering ourselves more.
Thanks, Jill. That's about empowering ourselves more. Raj, are you going to tell me about what work we need to do with others, the allies, so that this woman who is empowered, who is empowering themselves more, can flourish in the workplace and be able to openly discuss?
There's all sorts of things we can do. One of the things that we've held at a football club is empowerment conferences. We've had them for the past 2 years now, where we take effectively the majority of a day at the stadium, at the John Smith Stadium in Huddersfield, and we have speakers who speak about their own lived-in experience. It was female focused in the first year. It was wider empowerment in the second year, and it was a space again that people from other companies, other businesses came to learn from us a little bit and learn from other businesses that had done that work to create an environment that people felt more empowered and confident within. I think it helps when you have a diverse enough workforce that, as we just touched on, the females can bounce off each other and gain confidence from one another as well. They should obviously have the confidence with the male colleagues, but when somebody starts that conversation, we've experienced it ourselves, that other people will feel more confident to talk about it, to be able to share their own personal views, and it goes beyond the workplace as well. I think that helps break down barriers and walls, is when you can start to have these conversations at home as well. So my own mother's in her early 50s. This is something that she's experiences now, and you know, she's not shy to discuss it at all, and wasn't previously, but it's given me a more solid basis of knowledge, so that I can process my empathy a little better than I would have done otherwise. Rather than it being an entirely one-sided conversation, I can ask informed questions. We can do things that are more considerate, because we have a wider knowledge base thanks to the things we've done at work. You know, I don't need to tell you guys, but there's beauty product lines and things that are made specifically for menopausal women now, and things that, you know, if that's something you do on a Mother's Day or what have you, then it actually means a little bit more. You're thinking about people in a different way, and on a different level that is actually impacting them emotionally, that is nice to see. And when you're doing that at home, that reflects who you are as a person at work at the same time. And that's the sort of way that hopefully people can see that it's not just a belief system or an attitude you're taking for professional reasons. It's actually ingrained in who you are as a person, and that's what we're trying to achieve at the club throughout all the staff, so that everybody can have that confidence and feel empowered to not only embrace what they're going through, but share what they're going through, and we can work through that together in a way that helps all concerned.
Sally, can I just try and add something else to this, because it's really about opening up conversations and so on. But think about the diversity of your workplace and how different cultures want to talk about this.
Absolutely, and I think this is where, and what they've done really well at Huddersfield is having lots of different voices to this narrative. So those experiencing menopause and making sure there's true representation, understanding additional barriers. We know there are often healthcare inequalities, different challenges in actually accessing healthcare or talking about this. We know in certain cultures talking around things like menopause in a mixed gender environment or in a workplace environment would be considered very taboo. So how do we understand those barriers better, engaging with ERGs within an organisation to appreciate that lived experience. But one of the things we've seen really successful in organisations is story sharing from different perspectives. So Jill's really kindly shared her experience, and that's so important to hear that. But we've had male menopause champions in organisations sharing their own experience of the impact on their relationships, and we've had younger people sharing why they've come to learn about this, people from going through it from a surgical point of view, from an early menopause, and just all of those different voices really helps to give a diversity of message so people can feel they're represented in the way we talk about this.
Right, thank you. I'm just looking at, I think the questions are beginning to come in. You may have already covered this, but somebody wants to be very specific in looking at how you engage men better with conversations, and how you support them to be supporters of women going through menopause. Let me start with Melissa.
So one of the main symptoms that we often find actually is that a lot of women lose their libido, and it's not talked about a lot. And men are often really responsive when we find that actually your partner is going to struggle with this, and it affects relationships, it affects the work, it affects. So when you start to let men know that actually your partner's going to be affected, your work's going to be affected. So when men realise that one of the symptoms is your libido, your mood, your relationships, how is your wife going to be, how's your I don't know, it might be your mother, it might be someone that you're working closely with, and then your work does get affected, then men realise actually this is something that I can relate to more. It's not just their work colleague, but it's other people around them as well. And I think they realise actually this is my wife, it's not just my work colleague, and then they understand that actually menopause isn't just a workplace symptom. It isn't just the symptoms that they think I'm not connected to this. It's actually somebody at home. It is somebody that is connected to me that I can actually do something about, and this is probably why she's feeling the way she is. Maybe this is one symptom, but actually it's other things that are connected to it. This is why she's being raggy with the kids. I'm speaking from experience as well myself, but I think once men realise that it's affecting more people around them than they realise, then they realise that it can help other people too. And so we've done a lot of talks in the workplace recently. We're finding that more men want to come along too, and they're actually finding a lot of benefit from it because they didn't realise how many symptoms there were, and then when they hear how many symptoms there are, they're actually relating to it a lot more, and they're realising that they can help a lot more employees and a lot more colleagues, and they're engaging a lot more with it. And after the talks they're saying actually that was really beneficial. I didn't realise these symptoms were in my mum, in my partner, in my colleagues, in my sister. Thank you for the talk, because actually I can take that away and I can do something with that.
That's a good one, about getting people to identify personally with the problem, with the challenges, with the difficulties, because once they do that, they can really normalise their engagement. Sally?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think within organisations, finding men in your organisations who will really champion this, because it can really help to influence other men to say, well, if they're talking about it and learning about it, then maybe I should. And we work in a lot of organisations that are predominantly male organisations, and the conversations that happen from all ages, and the people that join in that conversation when you make it a safe space. And I think workplace education needs to feel comfortable for everybody, so that it's, again, we get people surprised when they come to training that they've done with us and saying, I thought I might feel uncomfortable, or I thought I might feel that this wasn't really for me. But actually, if you can help give people the language, give people the confidence, and because a lot of men who want to help and support, there's a lot of fear around, well, what if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? So actually giving them a lot of reassurance that actually supporting menopause is about listening, and it's about understanding and showing empathy, and that should be something that we can all do. It's not about it being a gendered topic.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful one, because that takes us straight to the next question. And the question is, how might you engage with or support an employee or colleague who you think might be menopausal and it is affecting their work, but they don't want to talk about it? That personal denial.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scenario we talk about a lot in our training, and it's one that I think managers are probably most fearful of. I think one of the first things to recognise is we can't assume that what we're seeing is menopause, because we're not there to diagnose, and there could be many other things. Jill's already talked about this busy time of life and lots of other things that could be going on. So we should never make assumptions. But using some of the skills that we have when we talk around mental health, that check-in twice is a really powerful tool, because we all know if you say to someone, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. It's an automatic response. No, really, how are you? So it's about giving people that safe space to be able to feel confident, to share what they're experiencing, often reflecting back what we're seeing, not always having to use the word menopause, saying that you notice that somebody seems really anxious about things they've never felt anxious about before, they don't seem quite themselves. Is there anything I can help and support with those open questions? Because as Raj spoke about, we can't force people to want to talk about this. We've got to do it in a way that's right for them. So it's about creating that opportunity for people to feel confident they can come to you as their manager, and that you will be there to support them in the way that's right for them.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to you, Raj, because I'm sure you've come across this example in your work where a colleague does not want to actually share this experience. And
to touch on this one and on the previous discussion as well of how you can get men more involved and comfortable speaking about it as well, is when we did the initial work on this and when we started to learn more about it as a football club and make it an education point for ourselves, we didn't give people the option of ignorance. So we didn't allow any colleagues, male, female, whoever they were, the ability to, opt out or not do it. We wanted this to be something that everybody embraced it and took on board. And what we found with that was that initial discomfort that people might have at the start of thinking about it, they were able to, once they'd had 2 different sessions that were a few hours long, they had no option but to engage with it a little bit more. And when they're around other people, when everybody's attitudes are changing as a whole, there's a more easily changeable alongside them. It's almost a herd mentality, a little bit less than focusing on individuals too much. The other power that we have as a football club, and speaking in my role specifically in communications, is that I know I've talked a lot about what we do internally, but externally we're not quiet about this. This isn't something that we just do behind closed doors at the stadium and the training ground, and we know that we do. We tell supporters about it. We tell the local community about it. We have articles on the website about what we've done with Menopause, when we were made a menopause-friendly employer, when we won the Menopause-friendly awards. Those were headline pieces of news that we were proud of and we shouted about across social media, across the programme, across different areas in which those words, those topics wouldn't have been previously, weren't comfortable previously, weren't expected previously. We've purposefully and strategically gone into places with conversations that they wouldn't have been before, because we know that we've got female supporters, but we've also got male supporters, and if we're able to engage them and see that everyone who works here is engaging with these topics. What is perceived as a male environment, perhaps football as a whole is a little bit more male orientated, but Huddersfield Town behind the scenes definitely isn't, or at least we try for it not to be. That helps because almost a tertiary then bounce on effect from that is that the fact that people see that what you're doing. But in terms of colleagues who might not be as comfortable discussing it, there's always somebody else to go to. We don't have an overly strict hierarchy internally that people only have one option of somebody to speak to. There's a fantastic answer previously of speaking to friends and family, which is always there, but you should be able to have people that you're comfortable with internally at work as well, and that's something that we try to create. Obviously, things at some point, if there's matters that need to be dealt with in a more formal manner, then you go through HR and everything. But our HR lead, Zoe Shackleton, she's the lady who started all this work for us. She's our EDI lead, so there's no better person to be able to speak to in that sense, because she'll be able to action the things that you need to if you're not comfortable being able to do that with your direct report. So there's a number of different factors and areas there as a club that we try and help the overall attitudes towards that, to make sure that people not only working for us, but people who are in any way associated with us externally are able to have those conversations as well.
Thank you so much, Raj. I think the next question is a fantastic one. So working in academia with brain fog can be a challenge. Okay, so in the absence of awareness, training and policies, where do we start?
Melissa, you want to talk about it from a treatment management point of view first?
In the absence of awareness, training, policies, where do we start? Speaking to colleagues and friends is definitely a start, but I think going to your GP, I'd always start with going to your GP if you've got any signs of not feeling right, if you don't feel yourself, if you feel that clarity is not there, if your brain's not functioning like it should do. I think that's always the first sign of, are my estrogen levels starting to decline? And it's one of the clearest indicators that kind of perimenopause and menopause is starting to kick in, because your estrogen levels are starting to drop and that cognitive symptoms are starting to kick in with the brain fog. And that's when you can feel that the estrogen levels are starting to drop. So I'd always say, go start with your GP and say that these symptoms are starting to kick in, and also start to make a note of what symptoms you're starting to get, because I think a lot of people forget, or they think that their symptoms aren't important enough, or they don't class them as significant enough. So then when they do go to the GP, they forget what, I suppose, especially with brain fog, you forget what your symptoms are. So always start making a note of. Period tracking is a really good one. Any other symptoms like brain fog, just make your own diary of what's going on so that you know your own body really well, you're in tune with your own body, and you're armed then when you do go see a GP or any healthcare practitioner, that you know what's going on with your body, and you can start tracking your estrogen levels as they're going down yourself.
Thank you, Melissa. Sally, I'm going to turn to you. You might want to actually put this in a very bigger picture stuff about how you can create a supportive workplace environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many aspects to that, and I think for us it kind of almost starts and ends with culture. So looking at the culture of your organisation and how can you put those things in place as pillars underneath that will really support that open, inclusive culture where people can feel that this isn't a topic that's taboo. And as Raj was saying about, this opens up often conversations into other conversations around hormone health in general. And for us, it's going through that, looking at your policies and practices, looking at your training and education, looking at what support you have in place, and then looking at the work environment. Because I think one of the things we've not really covered today is people do different roles in organisations, they work in different environments, and as much as menopause can affect your work or the way you work, the work environment can have a big impact. So for managers that are supporting people, really thinking about what is the work environment like for my team, what barriers may there be in place that might affect symptoms. So I've got that real understanding, but I still come back to the overall most important point is listening to your people. listening to what it's like to work in your organisation and what would make a difference for people, because that's where you get the best ideas. And some of the initiatives we've seen in organisations have been amazing, but they've come from talking with their people to understand how it feels. And when they put those often quite simple, quite low cost changes in place, it really does make the world of difference to how people feel about working for that organisation.
Thanks, Sally. Rash, do you want to say something about that? And because I want to see that lived experience of your football club and how they've created that supportive environment. You started saying a few things. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think obviously I'm not best placed, given that it's not something I've experienced, and I don't want to put words into people's mouths. But I've seen, colleagues that have just openly in the office. It's not a frequent topic of discussion, but it's a topic of discussion enough that people are comfortable having those, in an environment where there's more than one person. So if there's ladies in an office who, need to put a fan on or something that seems trivial, we can do so. And if they want to make light of that, they can. If they want to, say something or nothing, they can do. And it's small things such as those that when everybody has a shared understanding and sort of knowledge of and an empathy towards, it's not a big act, because sometimes it can seem strange when it's the height of winter and somebody needs to put a fan on the desk. Previously, you might have questioned why that was, but when you actually understand there's reasoning behind things, when you know and understand what people are going through, not just as a hierarchy issue, but just as a human issue as well with people that you work around, then it allows people to just be comfortable in their day-to-day behaviour and go through life being able to look after themselves and be comfortable without being questioned or made to feel uncomfortable or second guess what they're doing with themselves, which is hopefully making their life in general, but also their working life, that bit more enjoyable and comfortable.
Thank you very much. And just looking at the next question, I'm going to try and just spin that somewhat, because the question is asking about how women can overcome challenges and biases. We will talk about that. But the other side of that is, how do workplaces take off those challenges and biases in the first place so women do not need to in terms of their career advancement? Sally, I'm going to look at you first, and then I'll try and go through as many of the panel members as possible.
And again, it comes back to language. I think that's really important. So again, one of the exercises we do when we're delivering training is we ask those words at the beginning: how would you describe someone going through menopause? We often get those potentially negative biases or words that are associated. At the end of the session, we actually really revisit those words, because just because someone's at this stage of life, it doesn't make them any less capable. We've talked about the ages coming. They're really experienced, knowledgeable, really important talent within an organisation. So if that is created as a perception narrative around menopause within your organisation, then someone's not going to fear that they're going to be viewed differently because of the way menopause is perceived. And that's a challenge. But we've seen some great work in organisations where some of their senior female leaders have shared stories of their own lived experience. There's a great quote we have from somebody that was asked to describe what menopause was like, and she said, "It's just been the wonkiest journey I've ever been on," which I think is a great description. But at the end of the video she said, "I want to get a really clear point across. I'm still going to do a really good job. I'm still incredibly capable. I've got a huge amount to offer this organisation. I'm still going to do a really good job." And for them in that organisation, having their senior female leaders sharing that, yes, there are some struggles attached to menopause, and yes, for some it can be really challenging, but it doesn't make somebody less able. And I think that is something an organisation can do really well to change that narrative.
Exciting, really exciting. And I think what you're saying there is actually the caveat that I put at the beginning, not about the women, but it's our structures, organizational culture, our systems that would allow women to thrive, particularly when you're talking about career advancement. Does anybody else want to share anything about that? Jill?
Yeah, there's something I think we need, we all need to be aware really that some of these symptoms can have quite a direct impact on our mental health. I know you've talked about the lack of estrogen as it depletes, and the wonkiness, I love that word, the wonkiness that happens in the brain. And I think it's important then in terms of career advancement that we sort of hold on to ourselves and hold on to the confidence that we might have had in previous years, and remember and recall and really name some of the skills and experience that we have and we know we have. It might be a bit turbulent for a while, but actually the ship will steady itself out. There's a great book by Lisa Mosconi. She's an Italian neuroscientist who's doing quite a lot of work these days on estrogen and the impact on the brain, and they're starting to look at women's brains post menopause and seeing that actually they have heightened functions. So there's a level of kind of confidence that we need to sort of remind ourselves about, and also really reflect on how some of these experiences that we're having can feed into our sense of wisdom and our increased sense of compassion and our ability to be more empathic to others. So, hold on and hold your nerve, because there are riches at the end of the journey.
Yeah. Thanks, Jill. As you were talking, it reminds me of some of the challenges about how people may inadvertently, sometimes directly, measure achievements on the basis of quantity of contribution. We look at academia, people beginning to account academic publications rather than looking at the quality. So you may have a long time to do a lot of work, but somebody else has a shorter time, but they have very deep, high quality work. That's what I'm hearing there about, women who may be challenged, but they have that high quality stuff. And it's how the assessment of performance can also take account of that time off or the brain fog, which stops you from having the quantity, but the quality is there. Yeah. Okay. There's another one. This is a direct one, a direct question. Beginning to feel as if we are in one of those scenes, Auntie Meg, what do I do? So the member of the audience has got a specific question. I have chronic migraines and I'm also menopausal. I know they are both linked to each other. Any advice? Melissa?
Yeah. This one's really difficult to answer without seeing a patient and spending time with them specifically, because you need to understand the medical history, what's going on with periods, what other medication you're taking. But generally speaking, adding an estrogen back again can really help, but then you need to be really careful with which type of HRT you're using. Oral HRT can make your symptoms worse, so we always go with transdermal HRT for people that have got migraines. So patches or gels are always a lot better for people which have migraines. I'm a migraine sufferer, and I found that adding in HRT really helped my migraines. But again, any treatment, and I can't stress it enough, any type of HRT treatment, and again it goes back to workplace and making sure you're in the best place at work. You need regular reviews with a GP. A lot of workplaces have got private health care in place, but they don't always cover menopause support, and I think if you're a workplace that offers that private health care, make sure you're offering menopause support and regular reviews with GPs, because it's really important that treatment is titrated to make sure that you're on the right medication every 6 months, every 3 months that you're having reviews, because there's no point starting somebody on treatment and then not having that treatment optimised. It's really important.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to advise? That's very specific from Melissa.
I think there's something about lifestyle and diet. There's about choices that we're making day to day about how we treat ourselves, what we put into our bodies, how much stress we might be under, and how we can mitigate that a little bit.
But yeah, like is a big risk factor as well, and that can really affect your menopausal symptoms. All of that is really important.
Okay, just looking at that pillar of good living and bringing that in as well. Exercise, good food, rest, sleep well.
And I just
Sally?
think one point on this as well. As Jill said, menopause often comes at a busy time in life where there is a lot else going on, and actually encouraging people to prioritise their own self-care is really important, because we don't. It gets pushed further and further and further down that priority list. But actually menopause is a time to really take care of yourself. And prioritising that self-care is not being selfish, it's actually really looking after, because it helps manage symptoms but long-term health, which then enables us to help do everything else we want to do. But it is a challenge when everything else is going on at the same time.
Excellent. Good advice. I did say something about black menopause to start off with, because I have been reading a lot of findings, reports that are coming out, mostly from North America, and beginning to see it in the UK as well, that black women reach menopause 8.5 months earlier than white women. And they have worse symptoms than white women. Can you just comment on that in terms of how do we need to view that when we're looking at people coming forward in the workplace about the impact of menopause on their work? Sally? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think it's again that recognition of the different experiences people can have, that we shouldn't be making assumptions around when this shows up, and recognising there are so many intersections of menopause with so many different things. So race and ethnicity, from a gender perspective, you mentioned around transgender previously, disability, neurodiversity. There's a lot of complexity around how this intersects. So I think it's recognising that this can be a different experience, and there is still a real lack of research around, in particular, menopause and ethnicity, and there is some research in particular from North America, but we need more. We need more investment in understanding why that's different, and are there different ways we should be supporting and managing the menopause experience depending on what the findings from research is. And it's a really challenging area, because of the lack of research, people often feel a bit forgotten about and not really thought about in the context of the way menopause is spoken about. So I think in organisations, thinking how you can bring that representation into the conversations around menopause, and understand and recognise that the experiences can be very different, and we need to ensure the conversation feels more inclusive in the way that we talk about it.
Fantastic. I mean, I hear this all the time. People tend to have shortcuts to things and they homogenize. So we're talking about menopause. It is menopause. No, there are different intersections in the presentation of symptoms and the impact, and you are pushing us to think in that way, and let's be personalizing the way we deal with this. Melissa, do you want to add to that?
Again, it's with treatment and with awareness, and making sure that everyone understands that there's no one size fits all, and it's very similar to symptoms that we see with premature menopause. So people come to us sometimes and they don't understand why they're feeling the way they do when they're in their early 30s, and it's very similar to symptoms that we see with Black and Asian women when they get the symptoms that they do when they're younger than they think they are. And it's like, well, we have to be very open-minded, and we treat everybody the same way, and these symptoms can be the symptoms no matter what race, ethnicity, age. We treat every consultation the same way and every woman the same way. And these symptoms are your symptoms no matter what. We have to rule out everything to begin with, rule out your medical history, look at all your symptoms, and then your symptoms could actually be lack of estrogen, and that could be why you're feeling the way that you are, and then we have to look at how we're going to manage that going forward.
Thank you very much. So I'm very excited because we're coming to the end, but we have enough time for each panel member to say something about today's discussion, to wrap it up, and you can take as much time as now. I'm going to come to you first, Raj. What are your final comments on this, on the basis of the work that you're doing? Think about understanding of menopause in the workplace and how we all
Firstly, thank you again for letting us take part, be part of the discussion. It's illuminating for me, as this is something that's not going to be part of my lived-in experience, to hear the testimony, hear the discussion that goes around it, and further, enhance my knowledge of it, so that I can hopefully, be positively impacted and positively impact people myself as both a person and professional. I think it's important that we continue to have these discussions and hopefully have not just ourselves but other institutions in areas that people wouldn't necessarily associate with issues such as these, to show that regardless of what sector we work in or what area we're in, this is an issue that's pervasive, and it's not being ignorant to it and being quiet about it is going to help nobody. In fact, it'll do the opposite. So my main takeaway from this is just to have more confidence in the conversations we have around it, to ask people to take part and broaden their horizons. I think there'll be people within every single organisation that this will be important to, and we should empower those people to see those through. That this is something as a club that only a couple of people were really behind starting. But since that's been introduced, since it's been widened, it's now a club-wide belief. It's a club-wide acceptance, and there's nobody who's particularly against it. And as a principle, because it's something that as a collective we're all behind. And if more organisations can be like that, if different companies can be like that and make their employees and people both at home and at work feel a little bit more comfortable and knowledgeable, and that's brilliant. And I think the specialities of the other panelists as well, being able to have the correct access to medical fields, the correct knowledge base for all those things, being able to know where you can turn, because there are places to turn, is as important as anything as well. So I think these are really important and really fantastic conversations to be part of, and it's thanks again on behalf of the club for allowing us to be here.
Thank you very much, Raj. And I pick one word from you, and I want to really emphasize this. It is acceptance and not toleration. That's what I hear from you. Thank you for that. I'm going to come to you next, Jill. Your final words.
Thanks, Raj. I mean, I'm so impressed with the work that the club's doing. It just sounds absolutely fantastic. A really good role model, I think, for all of us. And you said quite a lot that I would have said. So I think my final words are around sort of getting informed, whether you're a manager, a colleague, a friend, getting the information. The information is out there. It's a matter of just choosing to focus on it a little bit. And you don't need to be an expert. You just need to have a bit of information, or at least that awareness. And I think be confident. Be confident. Trust yourself that it's okay to be naming some of these experiences and asking for help, and empowering ourselves to have these conversations, whatever gender we are or whatever position we have in the workplace. I think that's my takeaway.
Right, thank you very much, Jill. You've just blessed it all on our feet. It's the responsibility of all. Thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, thank you for having me here as well. It's been great. I think what everybody's doing, I think what Raj, Jill and Sally and yourself will do, I think it's amazing. It's not enough workplaces doing what you are doing, and I think, like you've all said, just empowering each other and sharing information, because not enough people know what the symptoms are, what treatment options are, how to get treatment, and how to empower yourself to have those conversations. So keep doing that. I think that's what's really important.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And to Sally.
I think everyone's kind of summed up some really great points there. I think, to me, being present and part of the conversation is really important, and that everyone has a role to play in this, because we always challenge that statement that menopause affects just over half the population, because it can affect everyone, whether it's going through it directly, whether it's through relationships. And we've seen time and time again, as you start the conversation in your organisation, it's amazing who joins in. And that's about creating those safe places to start with, to talk about this, so people can feel part of it. But that, I would just say as a final point, is being present and part of the conversation. We often get asked, how do you get started talking about menopause? And as simple as it sounds, we start talking about menopause.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Sally. Yes, I take your point that although women are the people who are directly affected, but it's the responsibility of all, including our allies. I've just been reflecting on these, and I'm so excited about hosting this particular conversation. Whenever I get round to talk about the things that the University of Bradford does, in particular when you have a vision, which is a social contract, you're actually saying to people, we are a world of inclusion and equality of opportunity, where we want you to come in here and make a difference. And we always say that we know before you make a difference, you have to feel that you belong in this place. Because when you belong, you thrive, and it's then easy to make a difference at any level. High performance is not high performance until you feel you belong in a particular space, until you can thrive in that space, then you can perform highly. I think the other thing that I want to personally take from this is that bit about action at all levels. The emphasis that yes, those individuals, the women who are going through menopause are there, we need to empower them to do things and so on. But let's think about what the institutions, the environment of work is. I was just joking when we met the other day. We've got cases of menopause discrimination that are going through tribunals. And institutions must know that it's really expensive to run this. Forget the financial expense, but talk about the humanity, the human expense that somebody has to go through this. When we can be flexible. I mean, what's that? And one of the things that I've heard today is that irrespective of those symptoms, if we look after people, if people feel empowered enough to talk through it, and we put the reasonable adjustments in place, they're going to be extremely successful. So we all win. And so it's been such a great joy to work in an institution where we're starting this journey. We know that Raj's team have got it, and we are running well after. But it's not just the accolade, though. It's the work that we need to do to be able to not just secure it, but be confident in securing it. Because it's one thing to tick that box and carry that piece of paper. The other thing is, do people really feel it? So do people feel the work that we're doing as a menopause-friendly organization? I think on this note, I really want to turn around and thank our audience. I know you have gained from it. I've gained so much. I'm going to write a book about my experience today. The things I've heard, the way I want to personally take a personal responsibility to look out, speak more, help other people. So it's about raising that awareness and encouraging all of us to be in that place of supporting and being supported. So on that note, thank you, everybody. Thank you, my panel of speakers. Sally, thank you very much. Melissa, thank you. Jill, thank you. And Raj. Thank you, everyone, and thank you.